B42, newly elected mayor of Oakbridge, mid-sized municipality of 85,000 people. Background in radical urban ecology and post-industrial theory. Never held public office before. Won election in massive upset because previous mayor was caught embezzling road maintenance funds. Ran on platform of the biosynergistic city. Believed modern urban planning was a war crime against nature and the human spirit. Concrete was the enemy. Straight lines were tools of capitalist oppression. Wanted to turn Oakbridge into the world's first large-scale solar-punk commune. Inherited a city with typical problems: potholes, aging sewer lines, traffic congestion, budget deficits. Saw these not as logistical failures, but as symptoms of a spiritual sickness caused by separation from Gaia. First day in office, removed the door to the mayor's office. Replaced it with a beaded curtain made of recycled hemp. Told the city clerk, a woman named Martha who had been there 30 years, that privacy was a bourgeois illusion. Martha looked at me over her glasses and asked if I wanted the daily briefing on the water treatment plant. I told her water treatment plants were chemical violence, and we needed to discuss wetland filtration systems immediately. Posted on Twitter about liberating the office space from the tyranny of doors. Got 2,000 likes from people who didn't live in Oakbridge. First major policy initiative, Operation Unpave. Believed asphalt prevented the earth from breathing and disconnected citizens from the soil. Ordered the Department of Public Works, DPW, to halt all pothole repairs. Announced plan to tear up 30% of downtown roads and replace them with permaculture paths. DPW director, a guy named Frank, came to my office. Frank was 55, wore a high-vis vest like a second skin, had hands like catcher's mitts. Asked me how emergency vehicles were supposed to navigate permaculture paths during rainstorms. I told him his concern for speed over substance was exactly why society was collapsing. Explained that slower emergency response times would encourage citizens to be more careful and community-minded. Frank blinked slowly, asked if I was serious about stopping pothole repairs. I said potholes were microhabitats and opportunities for spontaneous rewilding. Frank left the office shaking his head, muttering about liability insurance. 2 weeks into Operation Unpave, downtown Oakbridge looked like a war zone. Jackhammers running 24/7, tearing up Main Street. Dust everywhere. Local business owners started calling. Owner of the local bakery complained that customers couldn't park. I explained that walking was an act of rebellion against the petrostate. She said her delivery trucks were getting stuck in the mud where the road used to be. I told her to switch to cargo bicycles. She hung up, posted a photo of a muddy trench on Main Street with the caption, "Healing the scar tissue of the industrial age unpave." Comments were supportive, mostly from teenagers in Sweden. Second major policy, the natural flow traffic experiment. Believed traffic lights and stop signs were authoritarian control mechanisms. Theorized that without artificial signals, humans would naturally self-organize into a harmonious flow like a school of fish. Ordered the removal of traffic lights at the 3 busiest intersections in the city. Replaced them with community eye contact zones. City engineer, Sarah, requested an emergency meeting. Brought charts showing traffic volume and accident probability models. Said the intersection of 4th and Elm saw 20,000 cars a day. Removing lights would cause gridlock and guaranteed collisions. I told her that her models were based on a cynical view of human nature. Said that when stripped of the state's mechanical instructions, people would become compassionate navigators. Sarah asked if I was willing to sign a waiver absolving the engineering department of responsibility. I signed it with a fountain pen filled with organic berry juice ink. Day 1 of natural flow. Absolute catastrophe. Gridlock extended for 6 blocks in every direction. Honking was deafening. People weren't making eye contact. They were screaming at each other. 2 minor fender benders within the first hour. Police Chief Miller called me. Said he had to deploy 4 officers to direct traffic because the eye contact zone was a parking lot. I told him police presence disrupted the organic learning process. Ordered him to withdraw the officers and let the system reach homeostasis. Miller refused, citing public safety statutes. I threatened to defund the traffic division and replace them with conflict resolution doulas. Miller hung up, posted on social media that the initial friction was just the detox pains of a society learning to be free. 3rd month in office, resignations started. Sarah, the city engineer, quit. Left a letter saying she couldn't ethically participate in negligent homicide by design. I dismissed it as her being unable to evolve beyond linear thinking. Appointed a new director of holistic movement, guy named River, who ran a slacklining school. River had no engineering degree, but had great spatial intuition. Fourth major policy, the Urban Grazing Initiative, decided that mechanical lawnmowers were noisy, polluting abominations, fired the entire parks and rec landscaping crew, used the budget to rent a herd of 400 goats and 50 cows, released them into the city parks and median strips, announced that Oakbridge was returning to an agrarian idyll, posted video of a goat eating a dandelion in Central Park. Caption, "The machines fall silent, the beasts return, nature provides." Within 48 hours, the goats had escaped the parks. They were eating the prize-winning roses in the botanical gardens. Cows were wandering into traffic, causing more chaos in the eye-contact zones. Goat droppings covered the sidewalks. Parents complained their kids couldn't play soccer because the fields were full of manure and aggressive livestock. Received a bill from the fiber optic company. Goats had chewed through a junction box, knocking out internet for the business district. I hosted a town hall to address concerns. Explained that the internet outage was a blessing, a chance to disconnect and talk to neighbors. A man threw a shoe at me. I said his anger was valid, but misdirected at me instead of his own alienation. Fifth month, garbage collection was the next target. Believed the concept of waste was a capitalist invention. In nature, everything is food for something else. Implemented the zero-bin mandate. Banned curbside trash pickup completely. Mandated that every household must compost all organic waste. Inorganic waste had to be personally sorted and walked to a central resource recovery temple, formerly the dump, located 5 miles outside town. Sanitation union went on strike immediately. I fired them all. Said we didn't need sanitation workers, we needed material stewards. Expected citizens to embrace the responsibility of their own consumption. 2 weeks later, the smell was indescribable. Summer heat wave hit. Bags of trash piled up on street corners because people refused to walk 5 miles. Rats appeared, not just a few rats, armies of rats, big, confident rats that looked like they paid taxes. Health Department Director, Dr. Gupta, stormed into my office. He was wearing a face mask inside. Said we were on the verge of a bubonic plague outbreak. Showed me photos of maggot infestations in alleyways behind restaurants. I told him maggots were nature's recyclers, and we should honor their work. Dr. Gupta looked at me with dead eyes, asked if I had ever smelled a decomposing chicken in a plastic bag at 90 degrees. I said I was vegan, so the point was moot. He resigned on the spot, walked out muttering about lawsuits. 6 months in, Oakbridge was becoming famous, not as a solar punk paradise, but as a disaster tourism destination. News crews were filming the gridlock, the mud-filled streets, the cows eating trash, and the mountains of garbage. My social media following was huge, but the comments were changing. Less you go visionary. More is this a parody account? And please help these people. I doubled down, believed the chaos was the darkness before the dawn, decided the problem wasn't my policies, but the city's reliance on the power grid. Proposed the circadian rhythm energy plan. Wanted to cut power to the entire city from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. to align human activity with the sun and stop light pollution. Chamber of Commerce threatened to sue me personally. Hospital board sent a cease and desist letter. Said people on ventilators needed electricity at night. I called them techno-fetishists. Said we could use bicycle generators for essential life support. Scheduled the vote for the power cuts. City Council, who had been terrified of my electoral mandate, finally grew a spine. They blocked the vote. I went on Instagram Live, ranted for 45 minutes about how the City Council were agents of the petrochemical cabal, cried a little bit about the sorrow of the electrons. 7 months in, the state governor got involved, declared a state of emergency in Oakbridge, not because of a natural disaster, but because of administrative collapse. National Guard was deployed, not to stop a riot, but to shovel trash and direct traffic. I stood on the steps of City Hall, watched soldiers filling potholes I had lovingly created, watched them herding my goats into trucks, felt betrayed, felt like the world wasn't ready for salvation, attempted to order the National Guard commander to stand down. He ignored me, asked him if he knew he was enforcing a paradigm of death. He asked me to please step aside so the dump truck could pass. 8 months, recall election was triggered, signatures gathered in record time. 90% of the voting populace signed the petition. Even the local anarchist book club signed it. They said my incompetence was giving anarchy a bad name. I campaigned hard against the recall, held rallies in the muddy parks, spoke through a megaphone because the PA system didn't work, no power, told the crowd that suffering was necessary for metamorphosis, that the rats were our teachers, that the gridlock was a meditation. Crowd booed. Someone threw a bag of compost at me. It was wet. I stood there, covered in rotting vegetable peelings. Said this is the soil of the future. Nobody clapped. Lost the recall election in a landslide. 98% voted to remove me. Highest voter turnout in city history. People came out of comas to vote against me. New mayor was elected immediately. Boring accountant named Steve. Steve's platform was, I will pave the roads and pick up the trash. Crowd cheered for Steve like he was a rock star. I packed my hemp-beaded curtain. Left the office. Martha the clerk was already measuring the doorframe for a solid oak door. She didn't say goodbye, just sprayed air freshener in the space where I had stood. Spent the next year writing a manifest, titled The Concrete Cage, Why Oakbridge Failed to Fly. Blamed the failure on internalized capitalism and citizen cowardice. Claimed the rats were actually a sign of biodiversity returning. Claimed the traffic jams were community building events that people were too stressed to appreciate. Book sold 150 copies, mostly to sociology professors studying organizational failure. Started a consulting firm for radical municipal reimagining. No cities hired me. Got a few gigs speaking at tiny eco-villages. Even they thought I was too extreme. One commune leader told me, man, we just want to grow carrots, not ban roads. 2 years later, ran into Frank, the old DPW director. He was back at his job. We met at a coffee shop, which had electricity now. Frank looked happy, relaxed. I asked him if he missed the wildness of the permaculture paths. He laughed until he choked. Said it took them 14 months to fix the drainage systems I destroyed. Said the goats had eaten $500,000 worth of ornamental landscaping. Said the rat population was finally under control, but they still found nests in the library basement. I told him I was ahead of my time. Frank put his hand on my shoulder. Said, son, you weren't ahead of time. You were in a different dimension. Said the only thing I united the city on was hating me. Said neighbors who hadn't spoken in 20 years bonded over trapping rats together. Realization hit me. My community building actually worked, just not how I intended. I united the capitalists, the socialists, the old, the young. They all came together to survive my administration. I smiled, sipped my coffee, told Frank you're welcome. He paid for my coffee, probably out of pity. Left the shop, walked on the smooth, paved sidewalk, waited for the walk signal at the intersection. Traffic stopped efficiently. Cars moved in straight, oppressive lines. Felt a pang of sadness, but also noticed my shoes weren't covered in mud. Maybe Steve, the accountant, had a point. Maybe infrastructure isn't spiritual warfare. Maybe it's just plumbing. Went home, turned on the lights, felt grateful for the grid. Decided to retire from politics. Bought a small house with a paved driveway. Planted a single tomato plant. It died. I bought a tomato at the store. Civilization isn't so bad. 3 years post-recall. Still living in Oakbridge, mostly keeping a low profile. Town has fully recovered, but my legacy remains as a cautionary legend. Parents tell their children, pick up your room or the mayor will bring the goats back. I've become a local cryptid. Decided to attend a city council meeting just to see the boring efficiency. Sat in the back row wearing a hat. Steve the accountant was presiding. Agenda items, sewer maintenance budget, library roof repair, zoning variance for a new shed. It was incredibly dull. It was beautiful. During public comment, a young guy stood up. Looked about 22, wearing a hemp poncho, eyes full of fire. Started speaking about liberating the waterways and dismantling the oppression of storm drains. My ears perked up. He used phrases like hydrofascism and concrete trauma. I felt a cold sweat. He was proposing to block all storm drains to create urban wetlands. Council looked bored, dismissive. Steve was checking his watch. I stood up, interrupting the kid. Everyone turned to look. Room went silent as they recognized me. Steve dropped his pen. Martha the clerk gasped. I walked to the microphone, stood next to the kid. He looked at me with hero worship in his eyes. He whispered, "You're him, the visionary." I looked at the council, then looked at the kid, leaned into the mic, said, "Kid, storm drains prevent cholera. Sit down." The kid looked shocked. I continued. "I tried what you're thinking. It smells like death and costs millions. Nature doesn't want your help destroying the basement of the elementary school. Concrete is not the enemy, hubris is. Let the engineers do the math. You go plant a garden in your backyard. Turn to Steve. Motion to approve the sewer budget. Steve blinked. Motion recognized. I walked out of the hall. Silence behind me. Then a slow clapping started. It was Frank, the DPW guy. Then a few others. Walked into the night air. Streetlights were humming. Cars were stopping at red lights. Took a deep breath. Air smelled like exhaust and fresh pavement. Smelled like order. Smelled like civilization. Went home. Sorted my recycling. Put the bin on the curb for tomorrow's pickup. Felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Being a normal citizen is the hardest job I've ever had, and I'm finally getting good at it.